Hi, it's Jerry Roberts. Welcome to another edition of Newsmakers. It is Friday, November 4th. We will be joined by Nick Welsh and Josh Molina. But first of all, I'm very pleased to welcome in my old friend Phil Matier, legendary reporter from San Francisco, the most plugged-in political reporter by far in that fair city. Phil, thanks so much for joining us. We want to talk about this strange story about Paul Pelosi, wife of Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who was attacked in his home, their home, on in the early hours of Friday, October 28th. And you have been covering this for KGO and KCBS. What's the latest on what's going on? What have they been able to figure out?
Well, what we basically have is I'll give you the story in a nutshell. Paul Pelosi was awoken by an intruder in the early morning hours of, you said, a week ago Friday. The guy was, his name's David DePape. He is a Canadian citizen of all things who's in San Francisco illegally. This isn't only in San Francisco.
Well, it is a sanctuary city, though.
And he's been living in Berkeley for a number of years. I first came across him years ago during the nudist demonstrations in San Francisco. There was a group that felt that public nudity should not only be legal, it should be encouraged. And they were marching around the Castro and up and down Market Street, which is the main thoroughfare through the downtown and City Hall. And they were basically given the green light to do that. The only debate that came into question was whether or not they were properly putting towels under their undersides when they sat on benches. But eventually that wound down, and we lost sight of him, and he reemerged.
But you encountered him during covering Nancy?
I believe so. I believe so. I said, remember feeding the description of him and the pictures of him matches those one of the people that I see. I didn't have a conversation with him or anything like that, but he was part of that group. He's a rather large guy, and so we he sort of
so somehow he goes from being an advocate for nudists to what, a QAnon guy or what?
Well, you know, Jerry, it's one of those interesting combinations. He started out as like I said, this nudist advocate and also a hemp jewelry maker. And he was living in Berkeley, and then he moved into a garage in Richmond, which is near Berkeley, across the bay from San Francisco. And he started out, if you sort of trace him, is right, this sort of this hippie, libertarian type situation, person, nudity and that, and then kind of did that left right. It appears like, you know, travel morph to the far side of the moon, and then they hook up in the conspiracy land. And so, yes, he's sort of this QAnon guy, anti-vax guy, big government's bad, world domination, tell me the truth, into that. You know,
down the rabbit hole of that. But you know, the national political press, particularly, which we have such high regard for here in the left coast, is portraying him as a, you know, right-wing extremist, pro-Trump, and portraying the whole thing as a political story. Is it in fact that?
It can be, if you want it to be. As you know, from your decades of covering politics, anything goes, especially in the final weeks of an election. You can put any template you want on a narrative, and that's what they're doing. And it's interesting because, like we said, he shows up at Paul Pelosi's house. He doesn't attack Paul Pelosi out of the gate. Instead, he says, I'm here for Nancy. Where's Nancy? He makes it clear that he wants to, over the course of a conversation, that he's there to take her hostage and get the truth out of her. And if he doesn't get the truth, he's going to break her kneecaps. Paul Pelosi manages to get to the bathroom, dial 911. He doesn't say, I'm being attacked or anything like that. He leaves the phone open and has an ongoing, the conversation continues. And the dispatcher picks up that something is very wrong here. She sends the cops. They get there within 2 minutes. They get there. The door is open for them. They say, and DePape is holding a hammer. They say, drop the hammer. He instead hits Paul Pelosi, sending him to the hospital with a split skull and wounds to his arm and hands. 82 years old. That's it. It's all caught on body camera by the police. I don't think there's much of a question about what happened. Now, this is where it's getting interesting. You said, what's the latest? Well, now it's worked its way into the court system. And as you and I know, what happens on the street and what happens on the court are two entirely different stories. And I'm going to give you a flashback a little bit. The first hearing, the district attorney, the public defender, and San Francisco has some of the best public defenders you're going to find. If you get in trouble in San Francisco, even I would say, I'd take a public defender, okay? They have unlimited time and unlimited budget, okay? And they're very smart. He comes out of the courtroom, Jerry, and he says, my client appears to, be susceptible to these sort of conspiracy theories. And that's echoing what we're hearing in the national press and on the national media and everywhere, that there is this QAnon hate out there on the internet, which lures people in and radicalizes them. And that's a threat to our democracy. That's the narrative you heard, right?
Yeah.
From the top down, right? At least on the Democratic. And this is a heavily Democratic city. So he comes out and says, well, you can't argue that he didn't do it. You're sitting there going, what was his capacity? And he starts talking about possibly, brings the bells. Wait a minute. Diminished capacity, outside influences. What does that remind you of?
Where have we heard that before, huh?
Exactly. The famous Twinkie defense that Dan White, the supervisor in San Francisco who assassinated Harvey Milk and George Moscone, used. Lots of outside pressure, binge eating, things like that, diminished capacity. And you would say, well, what's that? I mean, who's going to buy that? Well, I will tell you, Jerry, a San Francisco jury just might.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The other thing about it is the guy seems pretty clearly mentally ill. And I think, on the natural, you'd have to be mentally ill somewhat to at least do this. So then you say, well, how much is it his mental illness and how much is it
Right.
the political influence? And then there was this very interesting piece in the Times yesterday about him and that very question: is he crazy or is he politically motivated? And they reference stochastic terrorism, which is people who are maybe on the brink anyway are influenced by this, apocalyptic, dehumanizing rhetoric that we hear, and we hear more and more. And that's kind of where this seems to lie.
Right.
That,
If
because he's
Jerry, you're right. First of all, you can be both. You can be politically motivated and mentally ill at the same time. There's no that doesn't, one doesn't cancel out the other. You can be influenced that way. And in fact, it's to note on that, if we take it and say, okay, that's what we're hearing nationally, right? Just like we hear about radical Islamists being influenced by internet and radicalized there, right? So that becomes, okay, it happens in a lot of different formats. Yes.
so, and then, then you sort of add the factor where the Trump wing of the Republican Party, which is to say the Republican Party, they found this kind of funny.
Yeah.
Trump's son, Donald Jr., with his, I don't know how many million Twitter followers, says he's got a Halloween costume, which is a pair of underwear and a hammer. Yuck, yuck. Hang on, I'm gonna admit Josh here. All right, he's coming on. And all kinds of, Carrie Lake, the Republican candidate for governor in Arizona, she thought it was funny. And we're now joined by Josh Molina, international man of mystery and the Joe Rogan of Santa Barbara. Josh, say hi to my friend Phil Mateer. This
Hey, Phil, how
is
you doing?
hardest working man in show business in Santa Barbara. We're talking about this attack on Paul Pelosi, Josh, and kind of, is it political? Is it a mental illness? What's going on? But certainly, the reaction by some of the extremist right is kind of dehumanizing,
Oh yeah.
I would say, and is kind of feeding the fuel that this is all about politics.
Well, I'm going to look. What we saw from the right, and as you said, the MAGA Republicans, some of them is distasteful. All right, and it's juvenile, and it's bad. All right, the joking of it. Uh, on the Democratic side, we have the same thing. It's your fault. Okay, you're doing this. So neither side. It's I'd have to say that this is a classic case that we're seeing on in America all the while now. Throw it out, both sides hit, right? Hit hard, hit fast, and hit each other. And what happened, I don't hear anybody talking about mental health in this. Is all of a sudden, no, it's political. This election is more important than ever because of this. And the other side making a joke on it. So there's no shortage of both sides playing it and making it political. I mean, nobody's sitting there going, well, we have possibly is a mentally ill person here. What are we doing about that?
Yeah. Well, and the other question that arises to me, I don't know, just as a policy matter, I mean, she's the Speaker of the House, second in line of the presidency. They have this nice house in Pacific Heights. Is there no security there? Does she not receive that?
Yes. Okay. Let me give you a cross on that. And Joshua, feel free to jump in at any time. Okay. Nancy Pelosi, as you said, she's third in line after president, vice president. That's her. The Capitol Police protect her. They protect the office. She is the one that would assume the presidency. Paul Pelosi wouldn't. Okay. He's an adult. He's not a child. He is not the package. So if Nancy Pelosi had been there, the place would have been the Capitol Police would have been on patrol.
Doesn't the SFPD keep an eye out there? I mean,
yeah. Now, this isn't the first time we've had an incident at the Pelosi house. Last New Year's Eve, a bunch of people, progressives sort of on that bent, showed up to say that the COVID relief package wasn't enough, that capitalism is bad, and they left a pig's head and blood, some sort of blood-looking substance there. After that, the San
Francisco, a town.
What a town. After that, yeah, I'm sorry. But you absolutely nailed it right there. What a town. Where else but here? Okay, nudist guy goes QAnon and shows up with a hammer and doesn't hit Paul Pelosi until the cops arrive.
Until the cops come, exactly.
Okay.
But so the cops were not on.
No, so sometimes they put a squad car out there. But in all honesty, they do a threat assessment, and if they don't feel there's a threat, they don't put a squad car out there, because somebody like Jerry Roberts or Phil Matier or Josh or some other citizens going, why does Pelosi get a squad car? She's got $100 million, and I get, there's the crazy guys. No one's protecting me from the crazy on the street, and there are some crazies on the street of San Francisco, and some of them wield hammers, and some of them wield machetes, and some of them shoot guns. So there's that. Now, there was, to my understanding, a deal. They were trying to do a deal where the police would keep an eye on that under a contract from the Capitol Police. But what happened was that the watching hit a certain amount where they had said, look, in order for us to continue or go over this amount, we have to submit it to the Board of Supervisors for approval. And my City Hall people said the Capitol Police didn't want to go public with anything or let anything be known about security. The place does have an alarm, but you got to turn it on. And Jerry, do you turn your alarm on at night before you go to bed?
Paul, we've known him for 40 years. I mean, he's 82 years old. First of all, I'm having a hard time with that, but he's just kind of the nicest guy. I mean, he's like the absolute model for the first husband. The guy, he's in the background. He's always supportive. He's always there, never says anything.
No, and 2 weeks ago, however, it was a different narrative, because he pled guilty to, or a couple months ago, to driving under the influence, right?
That's right. Yeah. So he's having a rough year.
Okay. So so the guy comes in, the alarm's necessarily on. they have security in that neighborhood. That neighborhood is the Gold Coast. That's what it was called.
Right.
It's the Gettys, it's the Pelosi's, it's the Larry Ellis's. I mean, this is, and they have their own private security force, which just goes to show you, if you've got a hammer and a cause, you can probably skirt around and just walk right into something. And we've seen that in history before.
If I had a hammer. All right, we're welcoming in Nick Welsh, the angry poodle of the Santa Barbara Independent. Nick, say hi to my friend Phil Mateer. We're just wrapping up talking
Hey, how are you?
Fine.
the Paul Pelosi matter. Phil, I know you got to run, but let me ask you this. Nancy Pelosi, it is widely speculated, if the Democrats lose the House, which it appears they will, is going to announce her retirement. You remember the last time when she was anointed by the Burtons, there was a mad scramble for that seat. What are you hearing politically about that situation?
Okay. First of all, everybody's, tight-lipped, because it wasn't until just recently that there was serious consideration was that the Democrats were in fact going to lose the House. There was some iffy early on, and maybe this, and we have surges and this, and this one's going to go that way. So that's the first one. The second one is, would she resign? That remains to be seen. We don't know. Because it would be, if she's not speaker, will she serve out the term or exit? Now, if she exits, that would mean a special election, just like we had when she went in. And just for history, for your viewers, I got to understand that, and this is San Francisco, when she first ran, as you might recall, she was not the darling of the left.
No, not at
was
all.
seen as
She was the conservative
cocktail waitress, glorified mother of 5, who's never done anything in her life except for be the daughter of the mayor of Baltimore, and is married into a wealthy San Francisco, and she's a Pacific Heights socialite, and she's the head of the Democratic Party. And so when you say anointed, there was also a lot of people that said, no way. All right. So she was castigated. She emerged victorious, hands down, easy, from this cast. And in fact, so many people were running at that time that when they had a televised debate, the one long televised debate, guys, they had to have it on bleachers. They couldn't find a stage big enough.
And the peace and freedom guy got off the stands and started talking directly to the camera, and they had to haul him out of there.
I mean, it's a show. So
all right, so back to now.
Yeah, all right. If she runs and she bows out with a special, which usually means you try to pave the way for your successor, I don't think that would work in San Francisco. I mean, it's long been speculated, and nobody said no to it yet, that Christine Pelosi's, Nancy's very democratically active daughter, who's very big with the party, would run to try to continue that. I don't know if that would work. Instead, because Nancy Pelosi, as big as she is nationally, she doesn't really carry that much weight locally. She just doesn't.
It's funny, yeah.
It's an independent outfit here. She's in Washington in a safe seat, and she doesn't really get involved with the local politics because, quite frankly, it's nuts.
So Scott, how about State Senator Scott
Wiener, who is already
pave over Santa Barbara with
right. The what?
Wiener wants to pave over Santa Barbara with all of his brilliant housing ideas.
And there's a condo in your future there. It might just be next door. There's Scott Wiener, very active, as you said, state senator, who has been, he's the ever ready bunny. He just runs all the time. I mean, he has his personal life, his politics, his public life, his politics. That's what he does. There are other people. Jane Kim, a former supervisor. There will be no shortage of candidates when it comes up. But I think the biggest thing for California and for us is if the Democrats lose control, then the House speakership possibly winds up with Kevin McCarthy, who's from California, but I don't think he's going to keep the money coming to the blue districts the way that Nancy Pelosi did.
Yeah.
And San Francisco would be in for a big, rude awakening because they have really benefited from the dollars coming in. And without her there, a lot of San Francisco, which is already feeling tech trouble, an empty downtown, and that would be it's going to be bad news on top of that.
Yeah. Nick, you had a very poignant column about which kind of led off with this Pelosi matter today. You want to weigh in on that?
I don't know that that column was sort of a disjointed personal vomit On
In
my
other
own.
words, your usual.
It really didn't have anything to do with, what the broader ramifications here of what happens if the Democrats, lose the House. I don't know anything, but I just find it really hard to imagine Nancy Pelosi stepping down prematurely, and for a lot of the reasons you just articulated. But yeah, no, it was.
All right, and to check out the Angry Poodle this week, everybody. They're really Nick.
But I will tell you this. I will tell you this. Paul Pelosi is home from the hospital. He is, as Jerry noticed, 82 years old. He suffered from a fractured skull, and not only that, but pretty severe injuries to his arm and hand. Okay, he's going to take a long time to recover. That might require Nancy Pelosi's attention. That might be the need to do that.
Right.
All right, Phil, I know you gotta run. I really appreciate you taking a couple minutes to talk with us about this. And I hope we can get you to check in maybe after the election, see what's going on up there with Nancy.
So it's going to be an interesting election, not just with her, but with Gavin. I mean, and if Trump announces and Gavin out there and the new attorney general and all that stuff is waiting to see what happens. But Jerry, I just want you to know that this 48 square miles is still here for you, because we know that our job is to give you something to talk about, and we don't let you down.
All right, brother. It's great to see you. Stay safe.
Take care. That has new meaning now. Take care.
I know. Yeah, take care. All right. Many thanks to Phil Mateer for checking in on the Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi matter, which is it's just so symbolic of what's going on. Between that and the Tesla in the channel the other day, we were beset by symbols here. All right, let's talk a little Santa Barbara stuff. Josh, you had this, and I think Nick, you matched it, or maybe it was Gene, story about the owner of the Natural Cafe in the 500 block of State Street, who's been there forever, bailing out, going to close up, and it's too much homelessness, too much crime, and then he says the rat vermin problem, which starts with the city and their lack of any program to address this, has in the last few years become intolerable. Look under any parklet and you will find rats' nests. This is not good for the image of Santa Barbara, I have to say. What's going on with this story?
I talked to Randy Rouse, the mayor, and he said
Henry,
he was at
come here.
If we had more of those dogs downtown, the rats would be taken care of. Right. Get your dogs under control there.
He's a ratter. I think I got him excited talking about this. So what? Somebody, Josh or Nick, weigh in on this.
Yeah, Randy Rouse, the mayor, was talking. He said, he didn't want to talk about rats, but that every city with parklets has rats.
Okay.
Jerry, you have to pay attention. It's your show. Get the damn dog off. You're going to be one of those people. You're going to be breastfeeding your dog soon.
Nick's mad, Jerry. You don't like Nick Welsh when he's angry.
No, well, he's because Henry is, competition for the angry poodle.
Yeah.
Here we have the mad Chihuahua.
Yeah.
All right. So rats. I mean, seriously. What is this going to? That's going to go national about what's going on here.
Well, it's not just here. It's anywhere they have parklets, because you have a large area underneath where stuff can accumulate. Food trickles down, and in a downtown area with lots of restaurants, you always have rats. And really, one of the untold stories about the pandemic was how it affected rat populations. And you would hear a lot of anecdotal stories from people in the extermination business that there were a lot more rats in a lot more places as a result. Also, strangely, there was more stories about rat cannibalization, where rats would eat each other during this. A little known fact that we didn't tell you because we didn't want it to be bad for tourism. See, we
Yeah.
want the tourist dollar here.
But the secret's out. Josh, is this going to do anything to speed up the deliberations of the Great State Street Future Committee, or
Well,
we're going to
well,
still just drag along?
well, not unlike what you were talking about with Nancy Pelosi and national politics and people just figuring out ways to make arguments that benefit them regardless of the truth. That's what we're seeing here with this very local issue, in that we have Kelly Brown, who comes out and says, I'm done.
He's
The
the
homeless
restaurant owner.
people,
He's
yeah,
the
the Natural
restaurant.
Cafe restaurant owner, Kelly Brown, he says, I'm done. The homeless people, nobody is coming downtown anymore for lunch, and if they do, they're going to the funk zone. The only places that are benefiting are people who are serving hard liquor. And then we have these parklets with the rats underneath, and it's a perfect little space for them to hang out. And he claims that the inspector came out and tore it up, and there was a whole family of rats that were there, and it was a huge deal. But if you talk to the city of Santa Barbara people, they say, oh, come on, this is Kelly Brown, this is the Natural Cafe, this is a restaurant that is no longer relevant downtown. And if people aren't going there, well, look across the street. There's plenty of people eating at other places. Look down the street. And so what they're saying is that this rat thing is sort of a convenient excuse for him to get out while he can. The homeless issue has always been there. So there is a dispute about how bad this problem is. But as a practical matter, I think it makes a lot of sense that there are rats downtown, and it's probably exacerbated by the parklets. But what we're losing is, before all these other places were here, before Institution Ale, before the Cruisery, before all those places that have those incredible parklets, the Natural Cafe was here, and it was a restaurant that was popular among locals. And now it's going away. And that's the big issue. Just like we saw McDonald's go away. Now they're a corporation, but they were a local hangout for a lot of people. And yes, they did attract homeless, but the homeless people are part of the community, and they did go there to get coffee and a cheap meal and inexpensive meal.
And I will say, at McDonald's, the homeless people who went there, there was a sense like you were welcome, and they did not betray that trust. There was sort of a code of conduct. I would go there and I'd eat, and there'd be homeless people, obvious homeless people in line, and there was never an issue. I mean, I'm sure there were times I wasn't there because I don't go there all the time, but I was struck, and there was sort of a sense that you belong, you're welcome, and you're treated like a human being, and they behave like one.
So here's the question: how accurate is the portrayal of State Street, of Santa Barbara's main drag, made by Kelly? And is anybody going to react to it at City Hall other than to say, oh, he's exaggerating?
I know, Jerry, you want to get your bowels in an uproar over this, but I will tell you, Josh had this. I got phone calls from people who are in the restaurant business saying, we know Kelly, and Kelly is an extremely outspoken person. He's always agitated. He has no filters, and he just lets it all rip. And there are issues on that block. It's a rough block. It's where there's a lot of bars and restaurants. And there have been rats there long before the parklets. I used to have our offices were on the 607 block of State Street. I can't tell you how many rats we had in our building, and it was not.
Bite your tongue, Jerry.
So it's
that's a big hanging curveball right there. But,
I know.
Okay, I'm gonna take that pitch.
But the reality is, there are people who don't like the parklets, and they don't like what's happening, and they don't like City Hall, and they can complain, and there's some merit to it, but there's other stories as well. And frankly, I think at City Hall, Kelly Brown is going to be dismissed a bit like he's just another complaint from a guy who likes to complain.
All right,
Let me
last
just say,
word
Jerry,
on
to
this.
answer
Last-
your question.
Yeah,
just-
and Josh, you got the last word, but tell me, yes or no, is this going to have any effect on the debate about either getting rid of or reducing the parklet?
No, in my what I've heard since my story came out was pushback in an attempt to marginalize and diminish Kelly Brown and make it about him and not about the issue. So I don't get any sense that there's going to be some massive, sort of investigation into the rat problem. I think things are going to continue as they were originally planned with the master plan. Now, that being said, I don't know if Nick's working on something, but it is worthy of looking and pulling the records. Are people finding rats underneath the parklets and doing a story on that, and seeing if it's just exaggeration and hyperbole or if it's happening all over. But I know in the week since my story ran, I've only gotten people saying, Josh, calm down. This is Kelly Brown. And the other restaurants are doing just fine. I don't know if that's been Nick's.
All right, let's.
Yeah, that's kind of what I got. And as for rats, it's sort of like the line of from Casablanca, shocked that there's gambling at Rick's. I mean, there's rats downtown.
It's
They're
not
always
good for
happening.
it's not good for the tourist business. I'm just
So
saying.
Jerry, you guys.
I will
come
try to
down
get it
from
in
the
as many
hill.
headlines as I can, just so you
All
know.
right. All right, let's shift gears here a second. We've had this dispute about the bike trail on Modoc Road and cutting down trees, and it was a big outcry about it, but it seemed it kind of got settled this week at the supervisors. It ended not with a shout, but a whimper. What's the resolution, Nick?
Well, the plan for the bike path along a 4,000-foot stretch of Modoc Road, particularly where all the canary palms are, is going to go forward for the time being. To put it in the football metaphor, this was a 4th and inches, not a Hail Mary. It was 4th and inches, and it was a quarterback sneak, and they made it the first down. So they have a long way to go. They have.
So he's not talking about Garoppolo, Jerry, if they got a first down.
How about those Rams? Anyway,
Still time.
What was really interesting about
so
the
this is
meeting-
not the original plan to cut many trees. This is sort of a compromise to cut a few trees.
So basically, this is the first plan that came out was 61 trees were going to go, and everybody just went bat guano. And then they said, okay, how about 48 trees? And then they still went crazy. And then they came up with Plan B, which is 20-some trees, and most importantly, no palms. And so they've really brought the number of trees down. But in order to accommodate this, they're going to have to take the bike path off the shoulder of the road where it is now, and put it in the side of the road, which is actually a 50-acre nature preserve. And the question is, the $64 million question is, does the language of the nature preserve allow this or not? And this is a classic sort of bungle by the county here, is that somehow nobody ever got around to talking to the head of the nature preserve about what you think about this until well after the horse was out of the barn and running down the street.
And in the end zone for the first down.
And in the end zone for the first down for the Hail Mary pass.
Josh, you had on the podcast one of the leaders of the opposition to this plan, but I think if I recall, it was before the vote. What's your sense of where the opponents are? Are they going to be satisfied, or are they going to take this further? Or
Well, they have declared partial victory because, as Nick said, the original plan called for something like 63 trees, and then they found out about it and they got the whole process delayed. So they see this as a victory of some sorts, because had they not complained and brought attention to the issue and got a petition with 5,000 people against the bike path, this would have been approved in August with 63 trees. I think they think that even though there's a touchdown that's been scored, that the game is still going on. I think they're possibly thinking about litigation. They're saying, hey, just build the path, but don't do anything to the trees or the path off the street. And it can be done. They point up to the city of Santa Barbara, up Modoc, and there's a path there, and it's not encroached into any of the open space. And so they point to that. They feel as though they were pit against biking and alternative transportation. And I got to tell you, I was out there on Saturday. They did this protest, and I was talking to Warren Thomas, which is why I asked him to be on the podcast. Who is out there but Eva Inbar, who is synonymous with being a alternative transportation bicycle activist as much as anyone in the history of this town. And she's out there holding a sign that says save the trees, and she actually believes that the bike path should be on the street where it is now and don't do anything to the preserve. And so I think she brings a lot of credibility to that, because this is a woman who's been advocating for bike paths and safe access for people for decades. So it's still a work in progress. They're not declaring a failure.
We're running long here. I really want to get to the election forecast. A couple stories that we did touch on, I wanted to, which we don't have time, is the Santa Claus Lane dispensary, approved unanimously by the Board of Supervisors. But Jana Zimmer, the opponent, the lawyer for the opponents, I just want to get on the record her great quote about the institutional bias, pro-cannabis bias at the county. She calls it a rolling due process violation, which I think is one of those great quotes we're going to keep. And then, Nick, you had the federal judge who decided the sit-lie ordinance on Milpa Street was unconstitutional, even though it wasn't a factor in the case that he was bringing up. So that was kind of weird. But in terms of the election, Salud is going to get what, 2/3, 60% again, we think. Greg Hart for the Assembly. Mike Stoker's been out there, trying to do something, but he's got the odds stacked against him partisan. Do we think he'll break 40%? Anybody?
I think Stoker will get 37%. The thing about Mike is that, he is within the context of the Republican Party these days, you have to call him a moderate.
Lock him up.
Here's a guy who came up with the lock her up phrase, and he is a moderate. That's how crazy a time we're living in. He was hired by the Trump administration to monitor the election results in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania. I think it was Philadelphia. And when he came back, he said, you're not going to get there from here. It's time to move on. And so maybe he was a premature in his acceptance of the election results. But he just doesn't have, he had $13,000 last time I looked at his campaign finance report.
And Greg has what?
And Greg has 181,000. All these numbers are obsolete, but Greg is basically going to cakewalk in here. I don't think it's going to be even remotely close.
And then, of course, as you've pointed out, two of the Board of Supervisors seats are, there's no opposition to Laura Capps taking Greg's District 2 seat, and Steve Lavanino, nobody's opposing him either. So a lot, the conflict has been in these school board races. Josh, for the Goleta School Board, is Christy Lozano going to win? Do you think the kind of right wing?
I don't know where Christy Lozano is. I think she's been entirely invisible in this campaign, and I think that maybe she feels as though her name recognition will be enough. Maybe they've crunched the votes in that district, but I haven't really seen her doing much. I've been told that she is knocking on doors during the day and working and trying to get working hard to get her name out, but I haven't seen any media or advertising or anything like that. I would
So
say that,
who's your pick in that for that seat?
well, again, these are not like my endorsements,
Oh, I
like just because
understand.
I pick them it just means that based off years of experience reporting this stuff, Emily Zacharias is going to win. She's got a great ground game, and she's got Laura Capps out there who is front and center, trying to support her, and she's got the Dem Party, and it looks as though she's going to win. And Christie, I don't know, maybe she'll surprise us all with her name recognition, but I just don't
Well,
see the
I mean, for
effort.
what it's worth, she was way ahead in the Ed Hat poll yesterday that I looked at.
Ed had also declared Sharon Byrne the mayor of Santa Barbara.
Yeah, well,
So
so did I. But
I think it's really interesting, just the whole school board race. Is the thing that was impressive or interesting from the outset was that the sort of cultural conservatives filed a candidate for pretty much every
yeah,
available seat.
nine candidates.
And so you have to hand it to them for that, but then none of them really showed up in terms of running a campaign. I mean, Christy Lozano, who was sort of the Joan of Arc the last time she ran, she has been so under the radar that she's invisible. Carolyn Abate, who is the world's most gracious, most
don't start
polite.
talking bad about Caroline.
No, I'm
No,
saying
man, it's stressing Josh
she's
out.
this total Trumper, but she is so sweet and nice and polite and gracious. And you have to think, the people who espouse those values do best in low education areas. If you have a bunch of college graduates, these candidates don't do well. It's just that's the sort of the breakdown. And this area that they're running in has kind of the highest PhD per capita quotient in town, and it's just demographically is not going to happen.
Yeah.
And
Well, speaking of PhDs, you're in the hotly contested Santa Barbara Unified School District race. You endorsed Gabe Escobedo, the head of the planning commission, who works out at UCSB. But the cultural conservatives have candidated in that race too, Effie Benalis. And then there's the third guy. What's your sense of where that one's going, Nick?
again, I'm just sort of making it up, but I think this is Gabe's to lose. He's been endorsed by the Democratic Party. He's been endorsed by the Independent. He's been endorsed by pretty much anybody who does endorsements. Effie Benalis has a track record of involvement with the district, which if she had a machine or a party or something behind her, she might be formidable. But she doesn't have that. And so she's sort of one person out there in the wind, whereas Gabe has this whole team behind him. Then you have Dan LaBerge, who, in a different circumstance would be a very viable candidate. Again, he is a moderate, thoughtful parent, a white person who is not a racist. He's but he doesn't have a team behind him either. So I just think politics being a team sport, and Gabe Escobedo having, he served on the planning commission of the city of Santa Barbara. A lot of people know him. I think it's his to lose.
Yeah, and then Josh and Goleta, in terms of the city council, Sam Martinez is challenging James Kiriakou, the embedded incumbent, I would say, and the big issue between them is the sales tax measure that's on the ballot. Is that going to pass?
It's probably going to pass. Sam Ramirez is opposed to it, I believe, and James is obviously in favor of it. I think it will pass, and we're looking at, again, people who are coming to play the game, but they're not playing the game with the same equipment as everybody else. And Sam is like, I'm running because I can, and I've been elected, but he just doesn't have the money. You need the money to run a viable campaign. James Kiriakou is spending money on KYT, for crying out loud. Like, This is a guy who's a heavy hitter. He's there to snuff him out. Like, he wants to dominate this victory. And Sam is over there on social
And
media.
who has refused to debate Sam?
Yeah, but he's being strategic, right? He's like, why give him oxygen? That's one of the political people terms they say. Why would I give another candidate oxygen when I don't need to? Sam's over there showing how he's a runner on Instagram, and it's like, Sam, that doesn't matter. What matters, you have to raise money, and you have to have walkers, and you have to flood, the airwaves with your message and your story. And so, I don't expect him to do well there. The big race, I think, is
Yeah.
Luce and Roger, and I think it'll be close. And Luce has all the advantages of the party, but Roger's been on the ballot
Well, he's been
forever.
around the track a bunch of times. Knows a
You know,
lot of
that's
people.
that's really interesting because Luz is a really, I think, in a lot of ways, a great candidate. She's
Well, you
very,
endorsed her.
we endorse her. She's very smart. She's very appealing. She has 8 years of experience on the Goleta School Board. But Roger's been around for a long time, and one-on-one, Roger is a very compelling personality. He knows a ton of people. He's sort of your old school politician, in the best sense of that word. He's sort of the contrarian's contrarian while on the council, and some people argue he's a contrarian for no apparent purpose. But he is the countervailing voice, sort of a much more business-minded, fiscally conservative kind of guy. That one is going to be a tough one.
Yeah, if I had to pick an upset on election night, I would say that would be the race where it is. Josh, you're pretty sure Luz is going to win, though.
Well, I mean, I have this conventional wisdom in my head. It would be a very, very sad night for Luz Reyes-Martin if she lost, because people wanted her to run for supervisor against Laura Capps. She opted not to, because who wants to challenge Laura Capps unless your name is Doss Williams? And so this was a more conservative path for her. And so if she were not to win, she's off the school board too. That would be a stunner. That would be a big political story.
Oh, of course, she's got a big job at Planned Parenthood, and given the forecast of what's going to happen next Tuesday, I think that's going to be continue to be very, very significant. All right. Any other thoughts on the election? Any surprises? Or should we all going to get to go to bed early?
Well,
There's a lot of stuff on the ballot. I don't know how much we're going to know on election night. A lot of counting.
Yeah. Well, I'll be on KYT all night trying to make sense of it for what that's worth. All right, Nick Welsh, Josh Molina, thank you so much, as always, for weighing in on all this stuff. Watch out for the stochastic terrorism that we've seen the outbreak of in San Francisco. Hopefully, Nick, your recommendation that people be kind in your column this week will take effect, and people will calm down. All right, we'll see you next time on Newsmakers. Don't forget to vote.
all right, you take care.